there. Welcome to the 412 Canada podcast. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kim Hutchins, and at 412, we're equipping the church for greater influence through serving. 412 is a ministry of Faith Baptist Church in Huntsville, Ontario. We are so excited to be able to continue to equip you as we expand our podcast to YouTube. Today, we have Dave Lane with us. We've been blessed to have Dave on previous episodes, which you can check out at 412.ca or your favorite podcast app by searching 412 Canada. In this episode, we're going to talk about this book, It's Just a Phase, which we'll post a link to on our show notes. And although today's discussion focuses on parenting, I think that if you're a volunteer watching this and you work with preschoolers, kids, or youth, it's going to be so helpful for you to understand these things so that you can better partner with the parents in the lives of the kids. I'm excited to chat with Dave about this, and he has such a passion to help this next generation become everything God wants them to become. He believes that this is done by encouraging parents, equipping youth leaders, and engaging students. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I always love coming and visiting 412.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're here, Dave, and that this worked out. It's been quite the season.
It has been interesting. It has been interesting.
Now, I know that for volunteers, we haven't done a lot of volunteering this year, and we've been really focusing on our families.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kick off. How is your family doing?
We are doing well. I think the word that we are learning as a family is grace, because we're all living in the same house, working out of home.
All day long.
And so it's been, so we're showing each other grace. We keep saying to each other, you've got to show grace. And so it's been good. But a lot of changes. I've changed positions. I'm no longer a youth pastor. I'm working for Youth for Christ, or Youth Unlimited, YFC Sarnia Lambton, beginning a new chapter there, or new satellite. So we're excited about that. So a lot of changes, but things are going well.
That's good. That's awesome. And I wanted to talk about, because we're going to talk about a little bit about It's Just a Phase, that book from Orange. And how did you hear about Orange?
Well, it's interesting. I became a family pastor, a youth and family pastor at my church. And I heard about Orange, and what I loved about Orange was it talks about the fact that two influences combined are greater than just two separate influences. And I loved the idea of Orange because the home was red, the church was yellow, and you combine them and it creates Orange. And so the thing is that we're helping parents do the best they can. And so that just really resonated with me, and I was like, this is good stuff. And in reading this book, I'll tell you, it was amazing.
Yeah, and I
Great
will put a link to it because I think people should really look at that. And I mean, you've been, as you said, a youth pastor for 30 years. And in that time, what have you found or discovered about parents and their influence on their kids?
Well, I think, Kim, for me, looking at being a parent myself, because I have a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old, so they're adults now, which is kind of scary. But what I realized was this, is that as their parent, no one knows them better than my wife and I.
Yeah, that's true.
And because of that, we have the most influence over them. And interesting, Kim, it was from the Orange Conference, I heard this statistic that kind of stuck with me. It said this, that let's say your son was in my youth ministry, okay, and he was faithful. I would have 40 hours a year with him. But you as his mom have over 3,000 hours.
I know, that's crazy.
And so take a step further. Let's say your son was through all of our children's ministry and our youth ministry. That's about 12 years, or not 12 years, 18 years. And if you do the math, that's about 720 hours we have with him.
Wow.
That's less than a third in his lifetime. That's less than a third of what you have in 1 year. And so we really need to help the parents be the influencers, right?
And how would you say, you talk about positional, well, and it talks about in there, positional and relational influence.
Yeah.
What does that look like? And how would parents do that practically in the lives of their kids?
Well, it's interesting because there's a diagram in it that is really, really interesting. It talks about when a child is born, you as a parent have two different influences. You have positional and you have relational. And the diagram has positional as the strong one and relational as the low one. But over time, what will happen is those two will actually switch. right?
Yeah.
And it happens in those awkward years of grades 7, 8, and 9. And so the issue is a lot of parents that I've talked to will wake up one morning and they're like, I have no longer any influence over my kids anymore. And I say, well, why is that? Because I will say to them, you need to do this because I'm your dad. And it doesn't work. And the reason why is because the positional has now kind of flipped. And they haven't worked on the relational. And so they have nothing in the bank to draw from. And so they're floundering, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So how could they work on relational when they're younger, right?
Yeah.
And then when they're older, like what's a practical way to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting because relational, we always have to be working on it.
Yeah.
Because there's a window and we need to maximize the time that we have because that window actually closes really fast. Because in the book, it talks about with a preschooler, you have about 12 hours a day with them to build relationship. Okay, an elementary kid, you have about 6 hours. A junior high, you have 4. And a high school student, you have like 2.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
And so you
right?
need to maximize the time. And I think it's interesting because they actually break it down in these books.
Yeah.
They talk about a preschooler, you have morning time, you have drive time, you have bath time, you have cuddle time. Okay? So you have these moments to kind of build those relationships. When it comes to the elementary kids, you have morning time still, you have drive time, you have meal time, and you have bedtime. And so in those formative years, you have a lot of time to build those relationships, even though the positional influence is high. Okay?
Yeah.
But it's when you hit junior high that things begin to change because then you come from morning time to drive time to meal time.
Yeah.
But in high school, you lose that drive time because they begin to drive.
You do,
Right?
right? You lose
Yeah.
so much time with them. It's kind of catches you off guard.
And so we're always trying to say, okay, how can we build relationship? Because Kim, for me, I gotta be honest with you, I learned this late in life. I learned this when my kids were like in high school. And I wish I had taken advantage of the time I had because they wanted to be involved with me, right? When they're young,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, oh, later. But then before you know it, it's like that song, The Cat's in the Cradle. Remember
Yes.
that song? Dad, can we spend time? Can we spend time? Can we spend later. And then
later.
it all switches. And then Dad's like, can we spend time? And the son's like,
Yeah.
I don't have any time.
Yeah.
Because there's no relationship, right? And so we're always trying to work on that relationship.
So then in parenting, what would you say is the end goal? Like what should we focus on as parents?
Yeah, the end goal is really important. Well, in fact, what I would say is this, is when you're parenting, you always have to have the end in mind. Because it'll come sooner. Because like I said to you, my kids are adults. My wife and I were sitting down the other day just thinking, man, it was just yesterday that they were preschoolers.
Yeah. Right?
And so in the book, it says this, what's not really interesting, that our job isn't necessarily to raise kids, it's to raise adults. Because our goal, right, is for them to actually leave, right? We don't want them to stay here forever, but we want to give them the freedom, right? And so we want to make sure that we're raising them to the point where they have the confidence to step out. And it's that relational that's huge.
Yeah. And so what are some practical ways to work on that relationship?
Well, it's interesting in the book,
Yeah.
it gives 4 words that I kind of, when I saw them, I thought, okay, this is really good. For preschoolers, the word was embrace.
Yeah.
Because for a preschooler, what you're doing is you're embracing their physical needs. And when you do that, you're actually establishing physical trust. So even as a young child, they see you as someone they can trust. Right? And then when they get to elementary, it kind of changes. It's about engaging in their interests. And by doing this, what you're actually doing is you're actually earning relational credit. So when you come home and they want to play with you, you know, like I don't know how many tea parties that I did, right? In fact, there was this one game my daughter loved. It was Disney Princesses.
Yeah.
And Kim, I had to wear a tiara. Right? And so here's this picture. They have this
I
picture
think
of
you
me.
could pull that off.
I could, yeah. I had the beard back then too, but I had this tiara. But it was because I wanted to spend time with my daughter.
Yeah.
And, you know, I love Disney, but the thing was, is just like, okay, but it was worth it. Because it was what I was doing was I was earning relational credit that I could pull from.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's that whole idea of embracing and then engage. And then for junior high, this one is huge, and I love this word, is affirm. Affirming their personal journey. Because I don't know about you, Kim, but I remember when I was in junior high, those are the years I like to forget.
Yeah.
Right? because they're awkward, right? Because you're going through all of these changes and all that kind of stuff. And so in that time, if we can affirm their personal journey, what we're doing is we're proving a relational commitment to them. What we're saying to them is no matter what happens, we're going to be there for you. When your friends bail on you, all that kind of stuff, when it gets awkward, we're going to be there. And that commitment is really strong. And then when you move to the last one, the last word is really interesting, is mobilize. For high schoolers, what we want to do is we want to mobilize their potential. And this is the time where we begin it's about leveraging our relational influence. And see, what breaks my heart, Kim, as a youth pastor is that a lot of parents don't have the relational credit. And so when it comes time to leveraging that, it's just really, really awkward, right? Like with my son, for example, let's give you an example. When he was young, I would say to him, Bob, you're not doing that because I'm your dad. And now when he comes to me, I say, Bob, this is what I would do, buddy, but it's your choice.
Right.
And we'll dialogue. And it's interesting because I would probably say 9 out of 10 times he'll actually do what I suggest, but it's not because I'm telling him. It's because I have a relationship with him, because I've established that relational credit. And now what I'm doing is I'm leveraging. And interesting, my kids are no longer teenagers and they still come to me as adults.
Yeah,
and that'll
amazing.
continue, right? But that's where the relationship is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
what have you found over the years has been really encouraging to you as a parent? Because your kids are grown now, so you can look back and what really stands out?
I think for me, I want to be very careful when I say this, that I made a lot of mistakes. Like I remember when I was asked to be a family pastor and I started reading these books on parenting, I was like, man, I wish I would have known this. And that's one reason why I'm really committed to encouraging parents, not just of teenagers, but parents in general, because I want them to know these things so they can be successful in the parenting. But I think the one thing that really encouraged me and the thing I remember were the times I spent with my kids. And yeah, I was busy and I would carve out times where I would go. My son was into Star Wars and we would go to these Comic-Cons and we would do these kind of things. And he remembers those things, and it's that time, or going on dates with my daughter, or going on trips, or if I would go and speak at a retreat, I'd bring my daughter with me, right? Yeah. And so now we look back on those memories, and because it was all about that relational credit. Now, I think I was doing it probably, Kim, not knowing. Like I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I want to spend time with my kids. And being a youth pastor helped too.
Yeah.
Like, because I would go on retreats with my kids and trying to find that balance. But being involved and making time for them, like the time you spend with your kids, you'll never regret. But you don't always you're busy, right? So it's hard making that time.
Yeah, it is for sure. Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking about those who are joining us, and maybe some have been volunteering in Kidsmen or youth or preschool, and maybe some are just volunteers or are just parents, and they're not even volunteering, right? Yeah. As many haven't been in this past year. So what would you say to encourage them as a parent or working with kids?
Yeah, I think working with kids, and I think when I talk to youth workers and children workers, what I would say is you're not their parent.
Yeah.
So the responsibility is not on you. Like I'm just saying that as a dad, right? Yeah. Like, my kid's spiritual growth is not dependent on Dave, the youth pastor. It's dependent on Dave, the dad. Yeah. Right? And I think for so long we have seen the paid professionals as the ones that are going to save our kids. And how can we, if we go back to those numbers, right? I have 40 hours a year with your kid.
Yeah.
You have 3,000.
I know.
So anything I do within youth group, it's going to be offset at home if it's not being. And so I think the thing is for parents, I think they want to do the best they can. And I think that's where as a church, we really have to come alongside of them. And that's the whole idea of Orange.
Yeah.
The whole idea of Orange is saying, okay, listen, the church and the home have to come together. And when we blend together, then we can help these parents. Because Kim, for me, it was a game changer when I heard those numbers.
Oh my goodness, right?
I was like, whoa. So if I'm not helping my parents, then I'm doing them a great service. And I don't want to do that.
No.
Right?
No, this has been such a fantastic conversation, Dave. I love that you are such a wealth of knowledge,
Oh.
right? And you've been doing this so long. Your kids are grown, so you've really seen a lot, and you're so engaged and invested in the lives of the kids and the parents, right? And that's definitely, I see that, your heart for parents and kids. And so I hope that those who are listening are blessed by this conversation. And I just want to thank you so much for being
Thanks,
on
Kim.
today.
I love being here.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. As I mentioned in this episode, we will put links for any of the books and resources that Dave mentioned in our show notes. Those notes are available at 412.ca under podcast episode 23. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, remember to subscribe on your podcast app. And for those watching the video edition, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss an episode. Also, hop into the discussion by following us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at 412 Canada. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, good. Yay!